is the best-selling pen in history, also the smoothest ball pen ever, and comes in over a dozen colors? Stay tuned for more.
Hello and welcome to Stationery Test Drive, where every week we take extraordinary tools, and today the most ordinary seeming sounding ubiquitous tool that you have ever seen, the BiC Ballpoint pen, and we're going to take it for a test drive. I'm Vishal.
I'm Samir.
This is Minjal.
And as we said, this is probably the most ubiquitous thing you think of when you think of stationery in this day and age, and for the last maybe 50 years, the ballpoint pen. And especially the ballpoint pens made by BiC, who are one of the biggest manufacturers in the world of ballpoint pens, and this is one of their best-selling products.
This is not just one of their best-selling products, it is the best-selling pen in history.
We covered very early on in our series the other best-selling classic pen, which was the Reynolds 045. So we thought it was only fair that we gave its biggest competitor and clearly maybe the front runner in the race.
Yeah, I mean the classic design of the Reynolds 045 that we were talking about was very likely a slight lift from this.
Oh, that there's drama here. Oh my god, hashtag drama. Samir, why don't you tell us about that drama and I'll test these out. We have them in colors in this one, not just one like before. So go ahead.
So the history of BiC starts with a gentleman named Marcel BiC, who started off this company in France in 1947 or 9, if I'm
1942, yeah.
Right. So, and they started as manufacturers of like pencil holders and pen accessories. Eventually, Marcel came across the new invention at the time, which was the ballpoint pen by Laszlo Biro. And he decided to...
he bought the patent for the
get the rights
pen.
from Laszlo officially. And which was for a huge amount from what I have read. And he brought the ballpoint pen into France and started manufacturing it. Of course, BiC didn't just copy something that already existed. They took the technology that Biro had invented. They introduced machinery from Swiss watchmakers so that they could make balls that were like an thick, which was very, very fine for the time. And so, yes, they brought kind of high-end technology and made it into a pen that could, go into anyone's office. The BiC pen was never an expensive thing. When it was introduced in 1952 and eventually in a few years it ended up in the US, it was being sold for like 30 cents.
Unlike the Reynolds, which we talked about almost being the iPhone of its times.
Yeah, I mean, by comparison, when the Reynolds International, the much more premium pen than this, was introduced in 1945, it was $12.
Wow.
And by 1955, say, when this would have been introduced in America, it was 29 cents. So that was a huge dip in the market.
This is not just the cheap Android phone of with that comparison. This is just something many magnitudes cheaper and therefore more popular, I would say.
Yeah, and this was this particular shape and things were specifically designed by the BiC company. So they came up with this idea of this sort of hexagonal, pencil-like body and the cap with this sort of clip to it. The hole in the body to equalize the pressure so that ink doesn't get pushed in or out with changes in pressure. This is a classic. And I think people like Reynolds then kind of started off from this point and made things like the 045 later on.
Almost as a response to this, a popular pen that anyone could afford and is ubiquitous.
Yeah.
But enough about history for now. We'll get back to it more later. Let's talk about actually using this pen in the here and now. You've seen my little test sheet here. But this is the best pen we've ever used in terms of a ball pen.
it's the smoothest ball pen that I have ever
Right?
used.
It's Minjal, what do you think?
Yeah, you don't, expect the brightness, of colors that one gets from this. What we've used is the BiC Cristal Up. If you look at it, I think there is something about the ink. Obviously, the composition that is very different from the Reynolds or Hauser that we've also tested in the past. And I completely enjoyed using.
This is your test drive for the week, which is what we do every week on this show. Minjal, you have a background in calligraphy, so tell us more about this one.
So there is an instructor by the name, Italian instructor by the name of Silvia Mandelli. I took an online class, her online class last year. She specializes actually in BiC based lettering.
Wow.
Oh,
So,
very
niche. We'll tag her Instagram account in the caption. But I think everyone must look at her work on Instagram. She creates fantastic pieces using mostly only the BiC pens. And rightly so, because as we've discovered, the colors they're so vibrant. It's great to blend. So I've used the purple and the blue, the pink and the blue. To get this really nice purple shade.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because I didn't spot a purple in our specific purple.
There is a purple also.
Yeah.
Like I said, I also tried writing with the pen, and it writes just as well as it would. As in, you can use it for shading. You can also use it for writing. So.
Yeah, I've actually never liked handwriting with a ballpoint pen, but this would change my mind completely.
It's just a very different texture and movement that this pen allows you to do than most ball pens.
And is this type of typographical style something you've done outside this class, or is this just...
This was the first time ever. I've been very apprehensive to use ballpoint pens and pencils for any kind of lettering because I've only mostly used the Pilot Parallel pen or, the markers for calligraphy. So this was a very unique experience.
It's kind of comic lettering or fun lettering that we used to do a lot of as kids. I think it's one of the things we learned quickly after being able to do just basic, pulled strokes. This was the kind of calligraphy I'm saying with air quotes that I used to do in rough books. Certainly, I don't think many serious teachers would go for it if I did my titling like this.
It's great for a style that's sort of very, I guess inspired by graffiti and things like that.
Right.
To be taken to such a sort of fine level with something like this.
Yeah, there's so much texture, so much light almost that you've gotten just by a light touch of the pen itself.
I mean, if you're familiar with art from the 70s and 80s, this almost looks airbrushed.
Yeah, but it's got so much more texture because of the ballpoint pen. I enjoyed using it a lot too. The last time we did a ballpoint pen thing, I did this frog on the pond with the Reynolds 045. So I thought, okay, let me do another frog. Another musical frog. That one was a punk rock frog. This one seems to be in a zen state of just having the best headphones ever. And yeah, the best pen ever, ballpoint at least. This was so much fun to do, and I just went pretty rough with it. I didn't go for anywhere the level of precision and texturing that you have got. But I enjoyed the process of just laying it down, especially the green. Once I started with the green, and I started with the sort of gold, copper, yellow. It's not actually a yellow. It's kind of a coppery orange, which is actually a very nice thing. I just don't think they should have put yellow on the on the outside of the cap because it does not represent that at all. That's a beautiful color.
Yeah.
So I kept most of them separate. I didn't layer. There's a bit of here and there where it mixes just to give it a bit of tonal value. But yeah, even the black is just so nice to go down. It would be great to just handwrite with. I almost felt bad using it for a fine sort of shading like this when I thought it should be just something that should go down nice and in a proper stroke.
And really, who'd say this is done with like a ballpoint pen?
No, it looks like like we'd use some kind of ink pen or some kind of marker, something very more built for artistry, not for general purpose stationery. And this is very much general purpose stationery.
But on that point, the 6 pens, it's a pack of 6 pens. It costs almost rupees 1,200. So these are not cheap.
Yeah, these are not cheap. These are 1,200 rupees in the US because we had to get these from a friend in the US. You don't get these in India where we are. Maybe not easily, but yeah, they're 1,200 here, which is about $20, no, $15, let's say, US dollars.
Which in India is quite a lot
huge,
for ball pens.
You can get, a good, very good ink pen or something for that price. Ballpoint pens for that makes no sense.
You can get 3 Poscas.
Oh yeah, you can get 3 Poscas. So like that's it. You're not getting anything else. But ballpoint pens, and we've talked about this before, the ball itself, things accumulate. The ink is sort of very gelatinous and it accumulates on the ball and then it kind of comes off. I had a bit of it here and there, the balling and the whatever, and then it kind of, luckily it dries and then sometimes it doesn't. And speaking of the Poscas, in this corner, some of this gold came off, and then when I mistakenly just brushed it away with my hand because I was doing the thing, and it just smeared there. And then it was the Posca to the rescue, the Posca White, which has now turned into my de facto makeshift correction marker.
So that is a technique that Sylvia also mentioned during the class. You usually keep a tissue paper handy to rub the excess ink. But I mean, it's very difficult to avoid that problem.
Yeah, no pun intended. Once you get into the flow of things, you kind of forget to do that. And sometimes it's fine. Like on an organic thing like this, I don't mind a few flecks of green. But on the white part, when there's a weird gold red smear, I kind of had to go in and fix it. But that's a minor problem, considering it's really a great tool to use, a great thing to doodle with, and to make things that are, pretty finished. And I think of all of us, the most finished work is by Mr. Samir today.
I try. And yes, I think, like with some of my, I think the Reynolds pen, I had done again a kind of a portrait, and this time I went for a figure.
Now that is a proper use of a ball pen.
And as Vishal and Minjal were saying, the sort of the leak and the balling up of the ink, I think that's unavoidable with a ball pen. It's just the way the ink and the mechanism works. So you will find places where that has happened in my drawing, but honestly, I think that's just a part of the aesthetic of writing or drawing with a ball pen.
It's the character of it.
You shouldn't really fight it. It's just something that you need to be aware of and take care of. You will find those specks at various spots.
They do add character, I think, when they're in the right place. When they're not, then yes, you go in and correct it.
I had a great time doing this, and the colors that Vishal and I had on hand when we were testing it out were the sort of the yellow, orange, the green and the black. I found all of them to be extremely smooth. The interesting thing I found was that the different colors had different textures to them. Not in a bad way.
No.
They were just different. And I think we have come across this with various pens before. I think the inks that go into specific colors just make the character of the pen different. Like the orange yellow that we used, which I kind of did makeshift flesh tone with, I found to be like probably one of the best pencils I've ever used.
Yeah, it behaves
just
like
felt
a pencil.
Like the smoothest, most easy to put down pencil that I had ever used. The green was almost like some sort of fine line paint. It came out like this sort of smooth.
I would almost liken it more to an oil pastel or a crayon, but like the finest oil
like
pastel.
The easiest pastel or paint to put down that you could find. And the black was the black was the one that behaved most like a ball pen, the way that you're used to. But again, as we've been saying over and over again, probably the smoothest ball pen that we have ever come across.
I think for those who are not aware, we should also maybe put up a picture, but BiC is also equally famous for their disposable lighters.
And shavers.
Yeah, I mean, the BiC company is quite a bizarre company in that sense, in that it's one of those old school companies that got into various things over the years, and they didn't try to break it off into a separate brand. They just kept it all under BiC.
Yeah.
Also, incidentally, it's probably one of the only companies to be listed on the Paris Stock Exchange. So they were obviously sure of what they were doing.
A stationery
stationery
A stationery
company.
company.
Which I'm sure that was very rare. I think it was in the 70s when they went into the stock exchange.
Right.
Does BiC make erasers?
I'm sure they do.
They do make mechanical pencils with the erasers.
Because then you could have a BiC eraser and a BiC razor.
Well, BiC did acquire Wite-Out. So the American correction pen.
Right.
Wite-Out.
Which is one of the original correction
Correct.
fluids.
So it is now officially called the BiC Wite-Out.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think over the past several years, BiC has actually acquired in pieces and now completely the local Indian pen brand Cello.
Cello,
Yeah.
right. Very popular in India. They are pretty much ubiquitous as well.
Yeah, and we haven't tested one of
we
their
have
pens
not.
out yet.
So we should see if they have some of the BiC magic has come into the Cello ones. Because
Yeah, I mean, we haven't tested it out formally, but I know that for I think a period of 5 years, I used to have a Cello gel pen in my pocket, and it actually worked for 5 years. So
Oh, fantastic. So yes, we will try out the Cellos next, I think, or soon.
Also, I read that BiC has this line of temporary tattoo markers called BodyMark.
They're called ball pens, Minjal. You just put a ball pen. Look, I'll do it right now. Come on.
No, these are actually specifically for tattoos. There's a stencil, you can use the markers. Obviously, I'm guessing
That's how we used to get tattoos in school. You just get a ball pen.
So yes, I guess in some of us maybe it's a generalization, but in typical French company fashion, the BiC company is very adventurous and kind of diverse, quirky in the way they choose things in various different fields and just keep it under the same brand. I think it's a great old school way of working.
Yeah, I love seeing those brands where you're like, wait, they make cheese and helicopters, and it's
So yes, BiC is a classic. And speaking of classic, the BiC pen design is actually such a classic that it is now in the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York. So you're not just looking at these pieces of art here, you're also looking at this piece of art.
Yes, calling it industrial design is almost selling it short. And things that shouldn't also be sold short is us at Inky Memo, which is the brand that runs this channel, and is a website where you can go and read transcripts of these episodes now increasingly, but also there is a newsletter with articles on stationery stories just like this and many more things to come in the future. But we will also be here in the future with more test drives this time next week, hopefully, where we are looking at another type of pen that is extremely popular with graphic artists especially. So stay tuned for that. And until next time, I'm Vishal.
This is Minjal.
I'm Samir. And if you enjoyed this video, you really should look at our original video on the Reynolds 045, another classic ball pen. And we also covered this very quirky and one of our favorite pens, the 4-in-1 by Hauser, which was, 4 colors in one. You can't go wrong with that. Vishal?
Le BiC is le best.